Hey everyone, this is episode 2 of the Basement Blather, a series I actually started in January and meant to continue, but never really got around to it up until now. But this is a series where I discuss different items and how I think they work and don't work and how good they are in The Binding of Isaac. Episode 1 was about Mom's Knife, and I think it's fitting that for episode 2 we do go for Brimstone. Also note that I plan on releasing these a lot more regularly now than I did so far. I think a lot of you probably thought this series wasn't even going to continue, but here we are. Also, a quick reminder, if you enjoy the series, make sure to let me know in the comments and leave a comment telling me which item you want me to talk about next. Anyway, Brimstone. The funny laser, as I like to call it, because, you know, it's a laser and it's pretty funny. Brimstone is, without a doubt, a really strong item. I'm sure most of you know of it. I don't really need to analyze it in regard to its strength. Everyone knows it's strong. We really don't need to discuss that. But I do think it's important to look into why it actually is that strong and how that applies to other items in the game. Because I think Brimstone is a very incredibly wrongly assessed item. Like, the strong things about it are not necessarily what you think would be the strong things. Sure, it does a lot of damage, you know, it can hit enemies through its piercing stuff, and it overall just has great versatility. But I think far and away the strongest thing about Brimstone, or the reason that it works as well as it does, is its range. Ever since I started streaking, range is a stat that I really came around on. As in, I think I did not give it a lot of credit for, and that's in part because of the fact that I now way more often go to bosses like Mega Satan, Mother, the Beast, Delirium, you know, these bosses with really large rooms, arenas. And when you fight these bosses regularly, you really do start to realize just how strong range is, right? Brimstone is great, it does a lot of damage, it charges pretty fast at its base rate already. But the range is really what sells it to me. Just the sheer fact that in a big room you can fire blindly into the room and probably hit a few enemies just makes it so strong. The fact that you can keep your distance, right? You tend to get hit in this game when enemies get close to you. That's in part, of course, because a lot of enemies just chase you down, right? And run after you. But it's also because a lot of enemies that shoot at you, you know, the farther you're away from it, the more time you have to react. So the ability to stay infinitely far away from an enemy by virtue of having that Brimstone, it just has so much value. Couple that with some of its strongest synergies, and you have an item on your hand that just absolutely decimates every regular room in the game without you even being in danger of getting hit. Right? Speaking of synergies, you know, the strongest for Brimstone, I think without a doubt, is homing. So at the very start of the run, we actually saw the telepathy for dummies, and when I recorded that, I legitimately thought about switching to it, because homing is just that good with the Brimstone. But obviously, for demonstration purpose of this video, I wanted to get a really ridiculous run, and the best way to do that is to keep the D6. But yeah, I mean, everyone knows the feeling of walking into a room and just firing your Brimstone and it homes after everything. You know, you don't even need to put in any effort. You just release the fire button, you unleash hell on enemies, and everything's dead and the room is cleared, right? It's just very strong. And again, like, part of that, the reason that this is enabled is by the infinite range, right? The damage is nice and all, but the fact that Brimstone extends through the entire room is what even enables it to home in on those enemies that are at the far end of the room. So yeah, very strong. Everything that bases off of ticks, we found the parasitoid in this run, and everything that's based off of ticks is obviously very good as well. Anything that applies any debuffs, like Rotten Tomato, like Mom's Contacts, anything that applies off of ticks, because Brimstone ticks so often, it's just incredible with any of those items that tick around a lot. So very nice. The reason I think it is wrongly assessed by a lot of players is that range and that comfy zone. So as I just said, the strongest suit of Brimstone is the fact that you don't need to get close to enemies. Whereas an item like Mom's Knife, which I personally evaluate to be the best item in the entire game, Mom's Knife forces you to get close to enemies by the way of it works, right? By how it works. So Mom's Knife compared to Brimstone is probably a much less beginner-friendly item. Or putting it the other way around, Brimstone is a very beginner-friendly item because of all that qualities, because of all those qualities it has, right? So yeah, Brimstone, just a sick comfort item. It's a very nice item to have around to just not get hit. And that's also part of the reason, I think, why you can only find it in the Devil Deal, right? I mean, obviously it's thematically fitting for Brimstone to be in the Devil Deal, but unlike stuff like Mom's Knife, which can also be found in the item room, you know, Brimstone is just too comfortable. Like, it's too easy. With Mom's Knife, you can still mess up and get hit. If you're not as experienced at the game or not as good at the game because you're still new, you're also going to get hit a lot more with stuff like Mom's Knife or Dr. Fetus or even Epic Fetus. But with Brimstone, you're kind of just coasting, right? Aside from that, of course, the on-hit effects are nice. I already named a few, but I do want to name a few more that I think are worth noting. One of them is Mucormycosis. The Spore Shot is just really, really nice. What's his name? The portal thing. Ocular Rift is really great because you're probably gonna have shots where you create like 3 to 4 rifts in the same spot, and the suction is just gonna be so big that enemies won't be able to get out. You know, similar to when you have really high damage and you shoot one tier and you have a really big portal. Creating 4 or 5 of them in the same spot is just very, very nice. There's stuff like Cricket's Body, which I'm thinking of, which makes the Brimstone split on hit as of Repentance, which is very nice. Obviously, piling on damage is always nice, but, you know, it feels more so even more comfortable on Brimstone, I think. Just by virtue of how comfy the item is. But obviously, you can add damage to everything, and it's gonna get better. That really goes without saying. One of my personal favorites is actually the soy and or almond milk, which makes the Brimstone go all crazy and fuzzy. Is it necessarily an upgrade? I don't know. I enjoy playing with it. The soy milk a tad bit more than the almond milk, personally, but that's a personal preference, right? Like, I just feel like the soy milk being a lot less random makes the item a lot more comfortable compared to the almond milk. One of the big things you're going to be looking for to enhance your Brimstone, well, not enhance your Brimstone, but protect your Brimstone. Remember how I talked about how the infinite range makes it really easy to stay away from enemies and be safe? Well, you're still going to want something to go with your Brimstone that protects you from enemies that do end up getting close to you. Most of the time you're going to keep your distance, but there's always the possibility that an enemy sneaks through and gets to you. So anything that's very good against defending you at close range is very nice. Obviously, the first things that come to mind is like any orbital. My personal favorite obviously being the Sack Dagger. Conveniently also situated in the Devil Deal, so there's actually a decent chance that you're going to find a Sack Dagger to go with your Brimstone. Cube of Meat and Bandage Ball, always very appreciated as well. You can always come across those in any of your runs. One item I'm looking at right now that is really, really good with it, I think, but also incredibly unlikely to be encountered would be the Monstrance. The item that gives you the damaging aura around you from the Angel Room, but taking Brimstone most of the time is going to forfeit your possibilities of going to an Angel Room, so good luck finding that synergy. Blue Candle probably being a noteworthy one as well. Not necessarily a super great synergy, but Blue Candle is just like really good in general. It's going to be able to protect you from tiers that you're not going to be able to block with your Brimstone, and I mean, if an enemy close by sneaks by, it's also faster to pop the Blue Candle compared to the Brimstone, so that can definitely be a nice save. I'm looking at Godhead right now too, which, I mean, I don't know, it's homing, but it is a tiers down and a very marginal damage up. Obviously, that's another one that you're not going to be finding very often, but I think it's worth mentioning. It's definitely not as good as Sacred Heart would be, which is a tiers down, yes, but it's a massive damage multiplier, and it also gives your Brimstone a fancy white color. And speaking of fancy colors, I do want to talk about that, because style points is something that I've been valuing a lot in Isaac, mainly for the heck of it. Obviously, it doesn't really matter what your build looks like, but it is funny to see all those flashy colors to go with your build. And I think Brimstone truly is the king of style points. Because, you know, you pick Common Cold, the thing turns green. You pick Parasite, the thing turns orange. You pick Sacred Heart, it turns white. You'd pick, oh my god, don't even get me started on Play-Doh Cookie. You just get a rainbow brim. It's beautiful and it's hilarious. Brimstone, easily one of the most style point synergistic items in the entire game. And I absolutely love it for it. Another one would be Tech X. Most of the techs are rather unspectacular with the Brimstone, but boy oh boy do I love firing big rings of Brimstone. So Tech X definitely also a personal favorite of mine to go with it. It just gives you, strength-wise, you know, I wouldn't even say it's that much stronger. It's basically Tech X with extra steps, with like a super large hitbox, which is obviously to be appreciated for an item like Tech X. It also does a heaps of more damage. But synergy-wise, I feel like it really doesn't change that much. And playing Brimstone Tech X really feels more like playing Tech X rather than playing Brimstone, even though it's really fancy. It's definitely much closer. What you're doing is much closer to Tech X than to Brimstone. There's also the noteworthy synergy of double Brimstone, which I personally like. If you somehow manage to get your hands on 2 Brimstones, or like a Brimstone and then activate Sulfur, you're gonna get a gigantic Brimstone, and Isaac's look also changes. Like he looks even more devilish. His horns, the horns that he gets from the Brimstone get much bigger, and they also start glowing on a fully charged Brimstone. It looks really, really nice. You get like that white laser that does a lot more damage, which is really nice, and that also ties in with the whole range thing and staying safe thing, because with a bigger hitbox, it's gonna be easier to hit enemies, which is also nice. There's 2020, which also kind of widens your spread. Like anything that gives you more Brimstones is really nice, of course. Even 2020 with its damage reduction in Repentance is fine. It's more spread, it's overall more damage. I feel like the spread is actually perfect on the Brimstone, no matter which one you take. On 2020, it's just narrow enough that it's really easy to hit 2 enemies at once, even at longer ranges. And then when you get to stuff like triple or quad shot, you do have the option to do these short range shots for triple damage. But if you stay far away, you also have that gigantic spread that allows you to cover more of the room, kind of like homing. Another one that obviously needs to be talked about is Ludovico technique. I think that's a very infamous combo because it's been around since the Rebirth days. And if I remember correctly, it was actually one of the synergies used to advertise Rebirth with Ludo Brim. It's not necessarily a great item, and much like Tech X, like taking that synergy feels more like you're playing with Ludo than you're playing with Brim. But it's obviously really fancy, you know, style points and all. It's not the best synergy, but it's just incredibly fun. And I think this is a good way to just summarize Brimstone, right? It's incredibly fun. It's not the strongest item around once you get to a higher level of play, but it's a very comfortable item no matter what level you're at. Very strong, allows you to keep your distance, and it does funny stuff. Like, that's part of the reason why I'm calling it the funny laser, right? It's not necessarily funny on its own, but it really doesn't need a whole lot to get funny. Anyway, I think that includes the Brimstone session. Oh, one more synergy that I think is personally very funny, but you shouldn't be taking, is anti-gravity tears. It's just an item that you should in general never take, despite the the -2 tier delay. Anti-gravity is just insanely uncomfortable, basically the exact opposite of Brimstone. But, you know, you release that kind of red swirly that shoots a Brimstone like 2 seconds later. And it just looks nice. And I think in certain circumstances, like a boss that doesn't move around a lot, like Mega Satan, for example, it could be nice to fire all these Brimstones in rapid succession, because that is one thing that anti-grav does let you do. But especially, like, the thought of fighting Delirium, who moves around and teleports around constantly with something like anti-grav Brimstone, probably not worth the pickup, but I can see its applications, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I think that wraps up our Brimstone talk. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, let me know in the comments what you think. Personally, where does Brimstone rank for you in terms of how much you like the item? And let me know what you think of this series in general, if I should do more of these. And don't forget to leave suggestions in the comments for item I should analyze next. If you want to watch more episodes of this, the link to the playlist is also going to be on screen right now, so make sure to click.